This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.
Welcome to the Brighton Central School District Board of Education public meeting for Tuesday, February 15th. To begin, we're going to have a quick public hearing regarding the first responder property tax exemption that was discussed at our last meeting.
Thank you.
I'll do a quick review on that, just a quick one paragraph that talks to what it is for those who weren't able to listen or be on. This document that explains the first responder property tax exemption is also a public document on the school website. Recently, real property tax law 466K was passed into law. This law allows towns, county, and school districts to opt in to authorize a real property tax exemption of 10% of their home's assessed value for volunteer firefighters or ambulance workers who reside in the town they serve. The property must be the volunteer's primary residence. To enact this exemption, the Board of Education must pass a formal resolution after considering feedback from the community at a public hearing. Are there any questions with regards to this exemption? I know I have to amend the agenda. I'll do that in just a second. Okay. Now I'm going to make a motion to amend the agenda to add a new item number 3, which is a resolution to approve the real property tax, the volunteer first responder property tax exemption. So the current agenda will have a new item 3, and all the remaining items will knock down by 1. So motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Karen,
Second.
seconded by Susan. All those in favor? Aye. Seeing no questions or comments regarding the first responder property tax exemption, motion to approve the first responder property tax exemption.
So moved.
Moved by Andrea,
Second.
seconded by Esther. All those in favor?
Aye.
New agenda item number 4 is public participation. Is there anyone here who would like to make a comment at tonight's board meeting? Seeing no one, we will move on to new agenda item number 5, which is approval of the agenda. We did that. I'm sorry, I've got to keep moving it down here. Approval of the minutes from January 18th and January 25th. We've all had those minutes. Any edits or comments to either of those meetings' minutes? Motion to approve the minutes of the January 18th business meeting and the January 25th special vote.
So moved.
Moved by Julene,
Second.
seconded by Karen. All those in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. Next up is item number 7, which is the COVID relief spending updates and overview. Dr. Allison Ryu and Deanna Spagnola.
So while Deanna and Nelson are walking up to the podium, I just want to preface their presentation by saying that at this time of year, normally in the blueprint and budget process, the update we give in February is regarding any potential spending items or proposals that would have a budget impact related to blueprint efforts. We don't have any of those this year, although frankly, because it's the work of the district, most of the work of the blueprint is what drives spending going forward, but we're not talking about new expenditures. Several times over the last couple of months, we've been asked about the allocation of federal funds. People are curious, how does this work? There are a lot of different numbers out there. As you'll see, the numbers are not what necessarily have been quoted or thought of or are available in other publications. These are the numbers we're presenting to you that we are actually receiving and how we are spending that money. It's actually fascinating information, or maybe some of us just need more hobbies. Fascinating, though, relative to when you see the real impact of that funding and what is happening. It's really being put to use both to make for a healthier environment given COVID, but also to support the very direct and very real needs of kids and staff members. So we're really excited about that and to share that information. So, Elson, go ahead.
Two things can be true at once. We all might need more better hobbies, and this is also fascinating information. Second thing I noticed, we have received a lot of feedback from the community about how and where and estimates of how much we've received. So this is extraordinarily helpful because we can put some real numbers and concepts to what we're talking about here.
Elson, take it away. Thank you.
Thanks for the intro. So this first slide just gives an overview of how we've been using our money, and the left-hand column, the gear funds, is really targeted more towards COVID response. So you can see some of the items listed there where we've spent some of the money: tents outside of schools, air purifiers, PPE equipment for students, for staff. And then a big piece of that was the technology infrastructure to support the move to one-to-one for all of our students here in Brighton. And what Deanna and I will chat about today are the columns that are listed there in green and blue, talking more about our support staffing-wise and supports program-wise. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today, but this just gives you an overview of kind of the bigger picture. And we'll start with some hiring updates to share with you the people that are part of this work. And in the academic land, we have some reading specialists and math specialists that have joined our team here in Brighton. For our reading specialists, we have Angela Dana, who is a reading teacher at the middle school and at the high school, 0.5 at each building, working with individual students, small groups of students, trying to build that reading base, especially for our kids 8-9 and some of the needs that we've seen through COVID. At French Road, we added an additional full-time reading teacher, and part of that was so that we could release reading teacher Jen Gallo to do some instructional work to help us look at our bigger picture and use her leadership expertise to guide some of our ELA planning. And Pavitt has joined our team actually just a couple weeks ago as our newest reading teacher, and we're working on hiring a 0.5 reading teacher at Council Rock. We have a job posted right now, and stay tuned for more about that. In the land of math, we have Heidi, who joined our TCMS and BHS team, 0.5 at each building, very similar to Angela, working with small groups of students in both buildings. And then we have 2 leadership positions. 2 of our current teachers moved into these leadership positions, opening up additional teaching positions at both the high school and at French Road. We have Stefano Monachino as our K-5 math intervention leader and Andrea Doyle as our 6-12 math intervention leader. And both of these teachers have been doing a phenomenal job helping to support really that gap of student learning, helping teachers to identify what we should be focusing on, looking at data to identify student needs, differentiating the curriculum, like you name it, they've been doing it, doing a phenomenal job. Thank you.
So as we looked at needs across the district, we were able to also hire some mental health staff. And we posted earlier in the fall for either social work or council work background. We wanted the strongest candidate to be in the different positions. So we were able to take a look at a counselor now over at adding to the mental health staff at Council Rock, Dana Peterson. At French Road, Katie Huey has begun over there. And just because she was recently appointed in the position filling for Meg Goodman, who took on the family navigator role, Malika Knight has joined. And excuse me, Dr. McGowan and I hired a wonderful candidate last week. We're waiting for the ink to dry there, a wonderful, strong candidate to fill our K-8 district psychologist position. And again, I mentioned Meg Goodman, who is now assumed the family navigator position, is working 6-12, supporting families, students, and staff, connecting them with out in the community, additional resources above and beyond what a school-based mental health team can provide. I'll turn it to you.
Doing a little trade-off here today. So as far as our program updates go in the land of instruction and curriculum, we really noticed a big need in the area of math as we looked at our last year of hybrid, remote, mixed instructional models. Actually, students didn't, perform as poorly in reading as you may have thought. Their reading was pretty stable across the board, and that was a trend that was not just here in Brighton, but across the country. And the math gaps grew quite a bit. So we targeted some specific math intervention programs to work with students either in a one-to-one basis or a small group. Some are individualized, like computer programs, and some are interventions that teachers are running in small groups through academic intervention. So iReady program for students at BHS and TCMS, and Number Worlds is being piloted as an intervention right now for certain groups of students at Council Rock and at French Road, and we added an IXL upgrade, which is a math program that we use at K-5. We added that for our 6th grade students. And then additionally, we have FEV Tutor, which you've heard me talk about before, but just that any time of day or night support that kids need, they can log in, they can schedule a session, or they can just log in and say, hey, I need help with this homework, or I'm struggling. I've gone in there to see what kids are asking about, and they'll say, I don't know what to do for this math sheet, and that's how they'll type it in, and then someone will pick it up and help them with that. So it's been a resource that has been really helpful for kids who are just struggling after school hours.
And to support the people, to support our students with some direct instruction, we were able to add some pre-K units to support our kindergarten students who are now full-time, full day at Council Rec. So some additional second step units, which came out of a request from the mental health staff there. We have continued a partnership with Puri, partnership in restorative, I always want to say interventions, but initiatives. I keep this word interventions on my brain. So our staff over the summer, building staff and administrators were trained in restorative discipline and how to take a stronger look at that. And then also looking forward to our superintendent's conference day in April, when we'll have the opportunity for our staff, they can choose. We're structuring the day as kind of a choose your own adventure, where staff who want to take a deeper dive into academic learning circles. We have many teachers who use those in their classrooms, but beyond a community circle, now having used an academic circle, and so people have the opportunity to take a look there. Continuing our partnership with Bavona, and those direct lessons have started in our buildings, and that also has included the professional development and training with staff, and that's an ongoing partnership and ongoing training that we continue to use and utilize on a regular basis. We also, as we spoke last month, have a partnership with Panorama. In fact, we had staff who were a part of a training today. I know both Allison and myself were getting texts throughout the day. There's people sending us resources for their feedback from that training. But this is a social emotional learning screener, and a part of that will be an assessment that's a culture climate survey that will be conducted with our staff again. I'm referencing the superintendent's conference day in April. Faculty and staff will have the opportunity to take that survey, and then our students and our families between April and June. So this is really going to give us a sense on where else do we need to put our resources? How do we need to shift resources? What do we need? What do our families need? What do our students need? What does our staff need in terms of making this the best that we can beyond just the academics as well, taking care of that whole child. So part of the survey questions, this is just an overview. I'm not going to read each of these to you. We shared this last month, but just again, an overview. Some of the possible survey topics, some folks will have questions based in these areas. And I'll pause so people can take a peek at that. And again, this survey will begin for our faculty and staff on April 8th, the superintendent's conference day. And we're all set. Any questions for the both of us?
No, I appreciate the explanation. There's a lot of detail there. Obviously, like everything else, this is available on the school website for people to go and ask questions or get questions answered if they want. I think this helps a lot with some of the questions we've received in the past from the audience about where are the dollars going and what are we willing to do for the dollars. And both of you have done an excellent job sort of letting us know how they're being applied with a pretty clear student-first focus. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great work.
Let's see, agenda item 8, very excited to hear from one of the newest leaders on our team, and that's Jeff Green, who's got responsibility for student and family engagement projects. So Jeff, the podium's yours.
Good evening, everyone. To the board members, it's nice to meet you. Some of you have met in person. Others have met you over a screen a couple of times. Thank you so much for having me. One of the things I would like to say before I get started is that the community here has been so welcoming, and I would like to publicly give a huge thank you to many of the people in this room, the principals, cabinet, Dr. McGowan, everyone, Ms. Lazafame, everyone's just been great, and there's other people if I haven't mentioned your name, but it's a testament to the leadership in this community, and I'm really, really excited about being here, so thank you for having me. And I am the new Director of Student and Family Engagement here in the district, and tonight I'm going to communicate to everybody a little bit about what some of the work I've done in my very quick 3 weeks here in the district. So I'm going to be discussing some of my roles in central office, some of the work I've begun at TCMS with the leadership there, and the other buildings across the district. So in central office, a couple of things that I am going to be supervising is registration, residency, and the tutoring center. With everything, as being a new member of the school community and coming in halfway through the school year, I'm coming in as a learner. So one of the things I've had an opportunity to do when it comes to registration and residency is work with our district registrar, Natalie Pincus. She's done a really amazing job of teaching me all of the ins and outs of registration. We've had an opportunity to also work on a couple of situations that have come up when it comes to residency, and I look forward to continuing to work with her. In the tutoring center, I've been working with the alternative education coordinator, Deb Appleton. It's been just as good working with her, learning the processes and the ins and outs, and we are continuing to work and develop on assessing the systems that we have in place, trying to fill any gaps, and to continue all the great work that has happened. Another part of my role is going to be the liaison to the Urban Suburban program. I've also had several meetings with the program director, Felicia Smith. I did have a prior relationship with her prior to me being here, so that's been a nice transition for me, and I'm looking forward to working with her and all of the families that have made an awesome choice to join the Urban Suburban program here in Brighton. So TCMS, this is one of the places where I've been spending most of my time. Danielle's been doing a great job of welcoming her and her team, and I've really enjoyed it. I spend a lot of my time there during lunches when students, not to take them out of instruction, and for a chance for me to connect with them. It's a balancing act of me being like the new shiny toy and also giving them opportunities to socialize with their friends, because that's a time that they all look forward to. So sometimes I'm there interacting. A lot of times they want to interact with me, and other times I'm just there kind of giving additional supervision. I've been attending weekly meetings and learning about the school culture and working through some of the systems that I know Danielle's trying to put in place. That's a work in progress. And the 8th graders, what a wonderful group of kids at 12 Corners Middle School, trying to build some relationships with them. And you'll hear soon, but I'm going to be working with all the schools with transitions, and I know that's a group that I'm trying to build some relationships with to assist with that transition a few months from now. I recently joined the Brighton support team meetings, where I get a chance to learn about the protocols, procedures that the school uses when it comes to interventions, and trying to figure out when it's going to be appropriate for me to join in and partner with some of the counselors and some of the families to better support students and/or families. And I've also Friday night had an opportunity to go and beat a couple of students in air hockey. It was a good time. But I did give up. I gave up my term because I didn't want to continue to. I want everybody to have equal opportunity to win. So I had to continue to move on with that. So I'm looking forward to attending more of those events. And then lastly, like I said, transition meetings. I've been working with building leadership and counselors. Some of you have seen on some of a couple of weeks ago, we had some evening events with orientations and information nights. I attended that for TCMS and as well with the high school. So I'm looking forward to being an additional support system for families and students during, transitions can be tough. I know because I'm doing it right now. So, but the more that we can support one another, the easier it can be. And I'm also just trying to make myself visible. A big part of my role is building relationships with students and with families and various community members. And I'm trying to make sure that I am present when I'm able to. And in some of the events, Friday was an awesome Black History Month celebration in the high school gym. That was awesome, and got a chance to dance and clap our hands and feel the groove a little bit. That was amazing. And Saturday night, my wife and I had a great opportunity to attend the Beauty and the Beast show. My goodness. The talent is unbelievable. I was very, very impressed, and so was my wife. I look forward to joining a lot more of the events and see the amazing talent that we have from our students here in Brighton. So some of the things I'm going to be doing moving forward is definitely building relationships with students. That's why we are all here, and it's going to take me some time for people to know who I am. Over next week, over break, I'm going to be making personal phone calls to all of the families that are part of the Urban Suburban program to introduce myself as a liaison. I've already reached out to some of them, but I'm going to make sure that I continue working through that. I've had people in the community reach out to me that I'm looking forward to meeting more community members. I had a chance last week to also meet with the president of the Brighton PTSA, so I'm looking forward to partnering with that group as well. I'm going to be going on the Washington, D.C. trip, which should be a good time. I can't wait to see what that experience is going to be like. But I'm a former social studies teacher, so I love Washington, D.C. There's a lot of history, and I'm really looking forward to connecting with the students in that capacity. Transitions, I'll continue that work. I'm going to be working with the building registrars throughout the district to look at systems and see how we can streamline some of the processes and procedures and create some transparency. I'm really, really looking forward to partnering with Dr. Hall and the Culture Climate team at Brighton High School. As I said before, I've been spending a lot of time at 12 Corners, and I'm really, really looking forward to listening and learning from the student leaders at the high school. I've already met some of them. When I introduced myself to them, they're like, oh, okay, cool. Compared to the 12 Corners, they're like, oh, wow, who's this guy? The kids were calling me Shaq and all types of fun stuff. So, and I'm just going to continue to try to attend community events and try to be a part of this great community. So I'm really, really grateful to be here, and I'm really curious on how long I was. But that being said, thank you again for having me. Are there any questions about anything that I may or may not have said?
I didn't time you, first of all, but it seemed great. I would say one thing. You described yourself sort of when you started as being in a learning mode. I'll also remind you that we have the opportunity to learn a lot from you as you see things for the first time. So it gives us an opportunity to be in a learning mode when you see something and bring it up. So while you're in the learning mode, we also should be considered to be in the learning mode. I want to make sure that you feel comfortable to say, hey, I saw this, I don't know why we're doing this. And I hope you ask a lot of those questions, because I think in my work experience, when we bring people on, those first 6 months are like a treasure chest of asking questions that just because you don't have the background, and we learn a lot of things. So I hope you're feeling confident and comfortable to be able to ask a whole bunch of questions. We have great leaders over here who I know will welcome it, but we as a board, and I know Kevin and everybody else would welcome it also. If you see something, say something, as they say, like, why do we do this? Because I think there's a golden opportunity in your first 6 months for us to be in the learning mode too.
Thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate it, and I will hopefully not bombard you with too many questions then.
Impossible.
Jeff, you started by thanking everybody. We just want to thank you for choosing us, because you chose to come here into a brand-new situation and position that we're trying to figure out, because you can have such a great impact on kids and families. So thanks for doing that. What a great start. Pretty fantastic. So thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Jeez. From that presentation to a budget update.
Well, don't time me. Yes.
Get the card ready. Card. That's funny when you think about using it.
Lou, were you just kind of hoping that I might just generate it? All right, so just very briefly to introduce this, because Lou is better for everybody. We'll go through the more technical pieces of it, but I want to start and tell you that we are going to walk through today the revenue projections, impact of the executive budget, so the governor's proposal, what that looks like here for us at Brighton, the final tax cap calculation, which is on your agenda for adoption later in the meeting. Those are, that you adopt that, but that is a technical formula that, although you're required to adopt, there's no choice in the matter. The tax cap is what it is. And then we're going to give you an update on spending projections based on the reconciliation of the BOCES request for services. So we sign up for those right now, and so we can get a sense for what that spending piece is. What contract transportation is as it looks right now, which I preface this by telling you, we are subject to pretty significant cost increases, just like people are seeing the consumer price index and inflationary costs go up in their everyday life. Same thing is happening with transportation, in addition to some mandatory services we provide through transportation that are going up as well. And then an update as we know them right now on salaries and wages and what that impact is on the budget at this point. So this is just one step of many in the process. I'm then going to jump into the community feedback, which we will give again at the 7 o'clock community forum, so people coming specifically to that event can hear that community feedback as well. That was through the thought exchange, just to let people know what the current sentiment were for the people that jumped into the exchange. I think we ended up with 600 responses from the community. So we'll go through that with everybody and give them a sense for that. Lou's going to start out and give us the technical pieces. Like I said, the one better at that. Estimated revenues. Lou?
Good evening. So tonight I'm going to present just the first pass of our revenue development side of the budget. And this is a summary that we present in our budget binder, just taking through some big components of it. So starting with the very top, and I'm not going to go through every line in them, but just the most significant piece of it. We were conservative in estimating the impact on sales tax from COVID. We have seen that recover, and we've seen actually growth in that. So we're taking advantage of that growth and reestablishing our budget base coming into the next year with $294,000. We see the rental of real property and pretty significant decrease there, and that is attributable to the sale of Brookside. And when we close on that, we expect to lose, obviously, the rental income that's associated with that. So that's what's driving that decrease in revenues this year. Some other minor ones, but then we have a pretty significant increase in state and federal aid. And again, as the state tries to fulfill the promise of paying the full amount of foundation aid due, we see us getting up to, closer to the 80% in foundation aid, and I'll break that down on the next slide. When we're looking at our financing sources, now these are not revenues that are coming in from an outside source. This is existing resources that are in the district. Last year, the Board of Education increased appropriated fund balance from $2.6 million to $3 million at the time that you adopted the tax rate. So I'm carrying that forward because that changed our property levy base, and you'll see that on the property tax cap calculation. So I'm carrying forward that $3 million. Monthly, I give the Board of Education budget to actual projections, so I expect we'll be able to replenish that this year and reappropriate that going into the next year. We also have a budgeted use of reserves, preliminary, I'm estimating, and this would be coming from our retirement accounts. So as we put money into our ERS and TRS accounts, the pledge was that would be tax levy neutral. So as those rates increase and our salaries increase, we'll offset those to maintain stability in the tax levy. So preliminarily allocating $250,000 from those retirement reserve funds. And then we get into the property tax piece of it, still most significant part of our revenue. This is the tax cap number, the $1.2 million increase that's calculated through the tax cap. So that would be our tax levy limit, factoring in all the exclusions. Should the board adopt that as a revenue source up to that amount or over the amount. And then pilot payments, which are the property in lieu of taxes. So overall, 5.3% in revenues and financing sources. When we look at and we disaggregate our state aid, so this is a portion of, or looking at where we are today versus what the governor proposed in her budget in mid-January. So we see an increase in foundation aid as was promised. So that's the biggest component there. We look at our BOCES, excess cost aid, and instructional materials aid. That's the IMA. So those are all expense-based reimbursements. To the extent that our spending goes up in any one of those, revenue follows the subsequent year. So as increases in those happen in the year one, same with transportation, we don't see that revenue. So it's always initial pressure on the tax levy, and then there's a revenue source the year afterwards. So you can see some of those components. An increase in transportation, that's because of the cost savings we had when we shut down schools in the 1920 school year. So if you remember when we shut down in spring, we saved money on transportation, but then we also lost money the following school year. So we're having a full year transportation last year with the hybrid learning model. So we're seeing that money in the 22-23 school year, excuse me. So this is our tax cap calculation. And again, what's important to remember is the intervention and the application of appropriated fund balance here. Our budget last year, if you look at all our budget documents, it was $400,000 greater. We used the current resources to reduce taxes at that point in time. That carries forward in the tax cap calculations this year. So that's the starting point. What I pointed out is some significant factors. So this is normally a growth factor that's computed by the Office of Real Property Tax Services. As they look at the growth of the Brighton Central School District, which is comprised of the town of Brighton mostly, and then portion of Pittsford, they assigned a zero growth factor for our school district. So there's no escalation in the tax levy that's associated with real property growth. We're a mature community in that regard, not a lot of new development. So it's generally a small amount, but this is the first year it's actually 1.0, so no new money associated with property growth. Then you see the change in property taxes, pilots, excuse me. You see $164,000 last year, or in this year, the 21-22 school year, and we see $157,000. So the extent that pilots go down, that money shifts to the tax levy calculation. And then you have in this portion here, the capital levy exclusion, and this is fully phased in now, the impact of the 2017 Brighton Facilities Improvement Plan. So you can see this $1.7 million to $1.8 million approximately, just some interest that's coming on in this last year. But now we have stability for the next couple of years as it relates to property tax computation. So overall, the tax levy limit adjusted for the exclusions is $57.9 million, which represents a 2.12% increase and allows for a spending increase of 1.37%. Just some updates now on the spending projections as we're going through and reconciling the different object codes within the budget. We wanted to take the opportunity to share some of the updates and spending pressures specifically from our BOCES services. So this is the chart that I present every month to the Board of Education, and I look at where were the initial services that we signed up for with BOCES. And I just want to highlight some of the big ticket ones, which are the business and technology services and instructional technology services. That's all related to our one-to-one program. Really, we ripped off the Band-Aid. We were forced to go one-to-one in all the right ways, but now we need to support that long-term. So that requires infrastructure, that requires a responsible repair replacement reserve for the student devices, and it also, we need to be responsive to the increasing cybersecurity risks. So a lot more services that they're not inexpensive services that we need to subscribe for to protect our infrastructure and to protect and maintains continuity of operations as it relates to instructional technology. So some spending pressures there. And then in special education, as I work with Deanna Spagnola's office and pupil services, we look at trends in special education and we look at forecasts. There's still a lot of meetings to have, but as we see likely placements or potential placements, I need to put that into our cost projection model. So we're seeing an increase of special education costs specific to BOCES placements and then itinerant services that we subscribe to for BOCES, increasing $773,000. And you could just have a sense of what the tuition. So as there's an out-of-district placement, generally the tuitions range from $55,000 to $88,000 for each student, and then related services or itinerant services that are required could increase total cost up to $110,000, $120,000. The second area of spending, and just to set the stage for some of the pressures that we're looking at on the spending side of the budget, is contract transportation. So what I've tried to do here, this looks really complex, but it can be boiled down pretty simply, is looking at the current fleet that we're utilizing right now versus what was budgeted. So I just looked at current invoicing to what was in our cost projection model last year. And we can see for first student, we've had to increase the bus, at least one bus in the morning and in the afternoon, and the average cost of that requirement was $68,940. A portion of a deficit due is last year we were budgeting, if you recall from prior tax cut calculations, we were less than 2% for a long time. So we were budgeting a CPI percent increase. And then as COVID hit and inflation started to go, the actual CPI for contract transportation was 3.2%. So we were under budgeted on what that cost escalation was. And then we have RMT and Transpo. So that's what we use for our alternative transportation. If you could see budget to actual this year, and there's a memo that's provided to you as well asking for a budget transfer, we're up 5 buses for Transpo RMT. And that's for buses that cannot be accommodated with our first student fleet. So those are generally out-of-district transportation, and I think in all instances of those 5 buses, it's one-to-one bus transportation. So we needed to bring on a new bus to transport one child to a placement outside of the district, and you can see the associated cost with that. In many instances, that out-of-district placement is also required and an attendant on the bus. So you can see we've had to add 3 attendants from RMT compared to the 4 that was budgeted. So all of those factors, just kind of rolling forward at a high-level analytic from contract transportation, we started with a $3.7 million budget in contract transportation. We look at just where CPI is right now and what we're forecasting the inflation or the contract adjustment to be for our existing fleet. That's about $282,000. The estimated cost of the additional buses that are being utilized today and that we expect will carry forward into the 22-23 school year, another close to $500,000. And then the estimated cost of additional monitors of $143,000. So that's almost $900,000 of cost escalation in just contract transportation without providing for any risk. So if these trends are to continue and we continue to get more placements out of district, whether it's move-in, whether it's placement because of need, appropriate placement based on need, this is not even budgeting for a risk provision of 1 or 2 buses should the need arise. And so lastly, third item, and this is obviously our biggest item, is part of the budget factors that are impacting spending, specific on salaries and wages. The district minimum wage adjustment for hourly workers that was approved by the board last week. We've been carrying that. We've understood what the cost implications of that were going to be prior to the board considering that resolution. So we were accounting for that. What we weren't necessarily accounting for was some of the new positions in response to mandates. So as we're looking at our staffing projections and just response to mandated appropriate services, we're looking at a 1.0 special education teacher to be added at the middle school and also at the high school. We're projecting increased needs of speech at the primary level, so we're budgeting for a position there, and then we've needed to respond and increase school psychology services at French Road. So we're budgeting for a 0.2 increase there. The other thing that we're trying to consider is all the great work that's happening with the federal dollars. In year 2, and when those grants expire, the needs that those services and programs are addressing, we don't expect are going to go away. So we need to be really thoughtful about the services that are going to be required and sustained long term. What's going to be our financial plan to slowly bring those into the general fund and have those supported with local dollars? So we're looking at mission critical positions right now that we're looking at funding in the 22-23 budget. And that's, again, to support our technology and just the maintenance of program that we have, continuity of program, to have technology integration specialists at the K-5 level. That's from application specialists, cybersecurity specialists, everything that we need for continuity of service and program. And then we're looking at, along the same lines, network administrator, and then RTI and academic intervention specialists. The work that's started this year that's proving to be effective, we know we're going to need to continue that in the future. So we need to put together a responsible plan to blend in those programs and services from federal sources. And then what's still unknown, obviously, is some collective bargaining implications. So that's yet to be determined, but something that obviously needs to be considered. With that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. McGowan.
Thanks, Lou. Great job. Appreciate the thoughtful detail. So we went out and asked the community what they thought, what their priorities were in the budget process. Essentially, what should we be thinking about? What should the board be considering as we move forward in building the budget and preparing it for the community to consider? The specific question, as we plan the budget, we really need to know what you think should be prioritized. What is most important to you? What would you like us to be considering as we review our expenses, taxes for next year, programs that are in place, programs that have been reduced, or any other aspects of the budget? I'm going to preface this by telling you I will not ask the question, I don't think the same way in the future. And here's why. When you purposely ask such a wide open question, there's a tremendous amount of feedback, which we value. But I think what we need to do a different job of and think about it differently in terms of a framework next year, saying to people, this is what it would require to have no more of an impact on you as a taxpayer. It would require X, Y, and Z. How do you feel about that? I think that's really the question that we need to understand better and provide an opportunity for people to express the other great thoughts that they have. But I think sometimes out of that context, it's not very clear to people because I think just about anybody would say, well, I don't want there to be an impact on my taxes. I don't think anybody in this room would say, I would like to pay more taxes. It would be the first time I've heard that. I will tell you what I hear often, though, is I'm willing to pay more taxes if it protects the programs that are important to my kids. I'm willing to invest in the great work that's being done. That is a common refrain for many people in our community. So I want to think about that when we go forward. That said, here are the results from that question. We had 600 people enter the exchange, which is a pretty decent number, actually, for people to go into something like this, far more than what we had in typical surveys, actually, when we would ask for responses that way. They shared 374 thoughts, 29,000 star ratings, which means almost nothing to me, but I share it with you in case it means something to you. It's really just the number of stars assigned to each of those thoughts. Caregivers, so in other words, parents from any level in the district, parents, grandparents, somebody who's giving care, essentially a parent or guardian. 64% of the respondents are 367 people. 14%, 82 people, community members without children in school. That's a pretty good number, actually. And 22% were staff members. We asked them to weigh in as well. It's an important consideration. How did that break down? Relatively even across the board. Council Rock, 26%, 25% French Road, 27% TCMS, 36% the high school, and then 10 K-12. So in other words, not one building, but maybe more than one building. And not applicable would be likely the people outside who don't have children in school would answer that way. The Wordle, essentially what words were mentioned the most, just like a quick visual glance. What does this mean? Not, again, a ton. Snow, clearly on people's mind. Many comments about snow days at that time. They threw that in there for sure. Trips, field trips, things like that. Enrichment. There were several thanks as well. Foreign language being important. Academic enrichment. Support. Common words used throughout the exchange. What were the top thoughts? I'll give you the top three. Keep academic programming. Don't eliminate classes. It's why our kids are in school. Number one thought in the entire exchange when looking at all groups together. Second thought, quality of instruction. Great teachers engage kids and make learning. Prioritize writing and communicating. These skills will be required in any and all jobs and life. So our top three thoughts of the 374 shared. Again, this is among all participants. How did they rate them? All about instruction, essentially. The artificial intelligence in the platform themes the comments as well, and it broke down to specific comments around kids, taxes, different types of classes, programs, pay, staffing, support, snow days, a bunch of comments about snow days, you know, I find that shocking, later start times, and then a whole bunch of different comments, about 127 or so fell into the miscellaneous category, so they were all over the place. This just shows you essentially the importance or the rating in each of these themes. So pretty even across the board in terms of star score, pretty close to 3.5 from one end to the other in terms of where the themes kind of weighted in the exchange. In terms of those themes, just a quick sample for you. Classes, that was one of the themes, one of the buckets that comments fell into. Keep academic programming, focus on academics. Replace teachers who retire rather than creating part-time positions or cutting positions altogether. So we've definitely looked at when there's attrition, how do you replace that person? Is it necessary to have a full-time replacement, or is that particular position not a full-time position? How do you do that as efficiently? Somebody clearly expressing, in this case, that you can't, in their opinion, attract as high a quality a person with less than a full-time position, and that it increases class sizes. It's hard to know what specific position they're talking about, but sometimes there is a shift when somebody retires, and you don't need to replace with a full-time person too, so we just try and be conscious of that. But point well taken from this person's perspective. Foreign language was another theme that came up. Introduce Spanish or other common languages as early as possible, even if just once per cycle for basic conversational skills. Start foreign language in elementary school. This has been something people have talked about for years. Foreign language at 6th grade, which we have reinstated. So I think this person is certainly suggesting support for that. The younger you are to learn a new language, the easier it will be to maintain it for the future, and it helps with math learning. Best to start by age 3. Also hoping that we will do that younger. In terms of taxes, increase the quality of education, keep all the programs, bring back things that have been cut, and don't raise taxes. That is a challenge. Brighton draws people with good schools. Grads from 20th century tell us about stuff we can't do now because the state cuts our funding. Get that back. Be careful of costs. Significant tax increases over the last 5 years, and it cannot keep going. Brighton needs to be willing to stay flat some years in cost per student. Please find a way to lower or at least freeze taxes now that the state funding is increasing. Just a quick comment about this. So my feedback is not at all to refute these comments, but it is clear when you read comments like this that we need to think also about how we communicate about tax increases, about the cost, and work through that and provide a lot of information to the community. What I mean by that is, one, the increasing quality of education in a very high quality place, but continue to innovate and thinking about keeping all programs or bringing back things that have been cut, which we really already have, also requires then increased revenue to make that happen, right? That's very simple. If you're going to put more in your shopping cart at Wegmans, it requires more revenue to be able to pay for those things. The being careful of costs, we comb through the budget each and every year looking for the ways we can become more efficient, and that will not change no matter how much state aid we're getting. But really important point here, playing into both that and the next comment. One, if you look historically at our tax increases, compare that to the increase people find, again, at Wegmans or in other inflationary areas in their own spending, the notion that there have been, I guess I would say, dramatic tax increases. We would like to present historically how our tax increases actually compare to the Consumer Price Index and the other areas that go up in people's lives. And they have been, I would say, I want to stay away from a subjective term, but I would say as reasonable as we can possibly make them while still supporting programming. So everybody's definition of a high tax increase is going to be different. I think ours compare very favorably relative to especially what other people are paying in terms of other parts of their lives or in other municipalities, but we would like to present that historical information. And then finally, we are still going to be in this budget year 20% less than what the state owes us. So I know this is a mantra people are so tired of hearing from me, but we are, yes, it is fantastic at 80%, far above the 50% or so threshold that we were, and then last year getting to 60%, which is fantastic, really is fantastic, and grateful that the state's made progress on that. Just important for people to realize we're not there yet. We're at 80%. 20% less 20 years ago would have been an outrage, a travesty. We are excited that we're 20% less because before we were 50% less. But remember, we're still 20% less. And I think if people thought about this in terms of their own household budget, if they were to find out tomorrow that they were receiving 20% less of their income, which we know people do find that out, that's a pretty dramatic cut for most people in their lives. And so for us not to get that other 20% is still significant, and we will continue to pursue that. Expect that to happen next year. But remember, we're still 20% less. Another theme that came up, bus drivers invest in teachers, their first responders, as well as cafeteria workers and bus drivers. It just happened to lop in that category because of the use of the term bus drivers. Drop-off pickup situation is not ideal. At middle school, high school, traffic flow in and out is not helpful. We have also looked at this for years and years and years and years, and we don't disagree. However, it is a volume issue. We're limited in space and the traffic conditions at certain times in the morning. It is better if you come a little bit earlier or take advantage of the transportation system that we talked about earlier as well. That does seem to help. Do what it takes to improve drop-off at TCMS, BHS. Kids are in danger, and so are the security guards. Safety should be paramount. Agreed. Also, again, would like to remind people, please take safety into account when they're pulling in and out. Be respectful of our staff, and make sure also that as people driving through those areas, as we see often on social media, many of our community members are reminding each other, and I think that's important too, to be safe. Field trip opportunities came up several times, restoring field trips, enrichment opportunities for students, offer opportunities for K-12 students, extracurricular activities, sports arts. Again, a lot of comments supporting do these extra things. This is what I'm willing to continue to support as a taxpayer. Maintain language and music programs, education programs specifically regarding to math, science, technology, this person put in, another high ranking comment. Controlling costs while keeping facilities and programs at high levels. We're right on board with all of that, makes a lot of sense. Counseling service, access to free meals for students, and teachers need more leadership support. As a parent, I've watched teachers do wonderful things, totally agree, for our students, and they are increasingly burning out. Also agree, invest in our teachers. This is staff-wide, community-wide, other school districts, nationwide. We're seeing this. We want to be really aware of that and continue to think about how to make that investment. As Lou alluded to when talking about our costs going into next year and what we've already done and what you've supported as a board for many of our staff members. Quality of instruction, prioritize writing and communication, focus on teachers in the classroom, not on administrators. We keep hiring later. The latter, where kids would benefit from the former. We're going to talk about that as we go through the process, actually. We just want to remind people again, these exchanges are a vulnerable moment for us to stand up and say, hey, this is feedback, and we want to acknowledge this, put this up on the screen and say it. I will say to you, we continue to be perhaps and almost certainly the lightest, leanest administrative team actually regionally, certainly in the county, but even beyond that. And so if you looked at the presentation that was given earlier, two of them, think about this, the framework, one being what Allison and Deanna presented in terms of what's been done, the number of positions specifically that are student-focused on instructional positions has been significant. We've hired many, 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 many people. So to this person's point, that's exactly what we're doing. And the position that was hired this year, Mr. Green's position, Director of Student Family Engagement, one, I should like just drop the mic and say his presentation. But number two, I would say to you that remember that was replacing an administrative position that was there already. So we don't mind actually putting this comment up on the screen and speaking to it because it is important to give the right information to people about what this means. I will also say though, this is a very common comment that comes up in any type of organization anywhere and in school districts. People saying, listen, keep the people that are right in front of my kids, recognizing that that's the person they interact with the most and that they know the most. So we understand that also. Interesting comments. This is the mechanism where you can take a look at two selected groups of people who had similar starring patterns. So the group A, in this case on this slide, is 141 people that are the blue group, side A. Side B being the green, a different group of people that had similar starring patterns to the exchange. So these are people that are seemingly like-minded, and how they fall out on certain comments. It's just an interesting analysis tool. Side A, in this case, prioritize later start times for middle and high school students. Start times are better for their mental health. Rated at 4.6. Side B, 1.5. You see some pretty significant division on that particular idea. Not everybody's in the same place on that in this exchange. Swapping start times, similar comment, 4.5, 1.5. Side B, go all the way to the right-hand side of the screen. I am supportive of a budget that includes new and innovative programming. I'm not supportive of a budget that includes $500,000 in new spending to switch the start times of Council Rock and BHS. Very interesting. Again, Side A, who on the other side of the screen wanted those start times, rated that very low. I don't agree with that because to them, the way I analyze this is that $500,000 is not as important to them. They feel very strongly about that particular idea. Side B is saying, yeah, I'm not up for that, especially when I see that price tag. Keep at least 1 to 2 snow days for kids. It's a small boon joy for children living in the long land of winter. That group of people rated at 4.4. Interestingly, though, the other group of people, that same group that is in favor of later start times, not necessarily in favor of the keeping of snow days. But where do they agree? And this is really the point that I want you to take home. What are the things that they agree on? So in a world right now where people are on two different ends of the spectrum on so many different things, they all agree, keep academic programming, don't eliminate classes. Quality of instruction, great teachers engage kids, and make learning. That's the sweet spot for us. That's where our community agrees this is what you should be thinking about. And if you take a look at the other differences slides, look right in the middle. Please focus on academics, spend money in areas that directly impact students. These two groups of people are two different selected groups of people, again based on their starring pattern, that have these differences and those similarities. They had several other disagreements. They had disagreements on masking, which was the most common. Disagreements on bringing back programs, especially arts and music, that may have been reduced or cut. Didn't agree with that. Side A, interestingly here, said, I appreciate the science-driven approach to masking. Please continue to encourage masking, as recommended by Monroe County Health Department to keep everyone safe. Thanks. Keep our children, staff, community safe and healthy. Felt strongly about that. Side B didn't feel that way. That same group that said, I appreciate the science-driven approach, et cetera, said bring back programs. The other group did not feel the same way. But what did they agree on? Please focus on academics, spend money in areas that impact students. So just an important way to think about it and analyze the information. The beauty of the exchange is the analysis is also in the eye of the beholder. The people both that were in the exchange, but that can review the results now. With our upcoming information that we send out to the community, we'll send a link to the summary report. Anybody can go in. They can filter actually by the ways that people answered, so the starring patterns of each of the groups, and they can take a look at that for themselves and draw their own conclusions. What do I personally draw from this in analyzing and reporting to you in making recommendations and in working with our staff to develop the budget, here are some conclusions I think are important. Maintaining programs is a priority for the community. We saw that in all those A, B slides, every different combination of that. Maintaining programs, priority. Academic excellence continues to be our priority. Continue to build programs and innovate is essential. Cost is an important consideration. Let's not gloss over that. People are concerned about that. They do want to continue to think about taxes and the impact on them. I think that's important for us to keep in mind also. If we took all of those expenses that Lou detailed earlier, rolled those forward, didn't do anything differently, the tax increase could be significant in this community. We're not interested in that. We understand the need to not be in that place. So we will do everything we can to make that as minimal impact as we possibly can, recognizing that to have no impact would require significant changes to what we're offering, and that's just not supported by the feedback that we've gotten or the way that we've approached this historically. Our community supports thoughtful investment that is focused on student impact, and I think when you go through presentations like Jeff's tonight, which was just outstanding, all the presentations that are done by our principals, the presentation done tonight by Deanna Nelson, these are all student impact. Every time, the vast majority of the conversations in this room and what's presented to you are student impact, student impact, student impact. So we're in very much the same place as our community members, and appreciate their feedback in this as well. So what should we be considering going forward? Remember, impact of funding, we're not there yet. Just want to continue to point that out. We're 20% short, and that's important to remember. That number is driven by our need. Remember, the formula is based on our kids. We haven't talked much about that mantra like we used to, but we want to make sure that's still clear to people. The money that we are due is based on our actual students, their needs, their demographics, their everything. We send the state the data, and they say, okay, based on your kids and what their particular needs are, this is the amount you should get, and we're getting 20% less of that. So important to remember that. Impact of inflation. A lot of those costs, and as Lou went through those particular costs, for example, the transportation cost, nothing we can do about that. That is the cost and the inflationary cost of transporting our kids. You can't decide not to do that. You're required to do those things. Impact of COVID, I think, is important to continue to remember, and everything that we're doing to support kids and families has a cost to it, and COVID has definitely impacted our need to support kids and families differently. And yes, there are those funding sources, but to Lou's point, we have to make sure that we can carry forward the changes that we're making, those important programmatic decisions, when that funding is not there. And so that plays into the longer-term decisions. Number 4 on the screen, the impact of today's decisions on the next several years. And how do we think carefully about this year's budget and what the impact is for the next several years, and be really mindful and planful in that regard. And then the impact of a tax increase on households. What does that mean for individual households? What does that mean in our community? And the ability for people to continue to live in our community, thrive in our community, enjoy our community. What is the impact of a tax increase on programs? Both positive but also negative, and what would that do if we were to modify a tax increase in a variety of ways, and how would that impact what we could offer for people? What is it relative to other cost increases that people have in their lives, and help people understand relative to, frankly, basic necessities, milk, eggs, utilities, et cetera. I think that's an important consideration for us to think about, and a framework to consider that relative tax increase also to prior years, and what is our history, what really has been the levy growth over time, and provide accurate information for people as well. So those are the considerations, conclusions. What are our next steps? We need to continue to monitor those budget to actual projections like we always do. Are we on track? You get regular reports, the financial report from Lou, but that's a big part of the budget process as well, to understand what we need to plan for next year. Although it seems like we're seeing home plate, we're only in February, so we still have a significant chunk of the year, more than a quarter left. It does impact then spending into next year. We need to collaborate with building principals, department managers, continue to look at where we can be more efficient, evaluate impact of any cost reduction strategies. What does that mean for a program? Evaluate our use of federal dollars, our fund balance reserves, that appropriated reserve, the appropriated fund balance that we talked about in terms of reducing taxes. What is the impact of that long term? And then we'll continue to advocate for equitable funding and mandate relief. We have, in fact, a meeting scheduled next week, Lou and I do, with both Senator Cooney and Assemblymember Clark to talk about some specific issues with regard to aid. That's a constant conversation. Several of you were involved as board members in the Monroe County Legislative Breakfast there's a week ago Saturday, talking about these very issues with our elected representatives as well and continuing to advocate. So that's a big part of our approach also. Any questions from the board at this point?
It's pretty much budget season 12 months out of the year, correct?
Sure is, yes, yes.
Exciting.
I feel like this is where Dr. Baker would jump up and say, no, it's not. It doesn't have to be, but yes, it does. Great, thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thank you, and thank you to Lou Alimo as well. Next up, we have a resolution for approval of the 2022-2023 school calendar, which is next year. And as Dr. McGowan is returning to his seat, I'll ask him if he wants to make any comments about that calendar.
Sure, a few. One, next year, we continue to maintain an approach where we'd like the most inclusive calendar we possibly can. So we would continue forward with the practice that we began this year of taking off Eid. However, it is a Friday evening into a Saturday. So if people look at the calendar and think, well, they gave up on that, no, that's not the case at all. We just don't have it on the calendar for next year. Similar to years when Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah falls on a weekend, we then obviously don't have a day off for that because it falls on the weekend. Next year, we have designed a calendar that allows for one snow day that would be the traditional no classes, either in person or remote. But then the days after that would have to be remote instructional days. And certainly aware of refining our approach on that, making that the most impactful day we possibly can, really making that meaningful. That allows us to continue to have the other days off that people have held as important to them, particularly the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and a day before, I believe it's December 23rd, that Friday, December 23rd. So other than that, it's relatively straightforward. There's no other changes. It's a step in the right direction, we think, and an effective calendar that honors the BOCES calendar as well, which maximizes our instructional time for kids attending BOCES programs.
Great. Questions from the board for Dr. McGowan in regards to the proposed calendar for next year? Motion to approve the 2022 to 2023 school calendar as delivered to the board.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Susan, seconded by Karen. All those in favor? Aye. And that calendar is going to be sent to the community this evening, correct?
It should be. I think
Yes.
Dan will probably
Dan's
send it
nodding,
within
so-
moments, actually.
Okay,
So-
great.
So travel websites should beware of any possible crashing right now.
I've already got questions.
I am sure.
Do you know?
Yep.
No, everybody does. Next up, agenda item 11, which is reports. We'll start with the financial reports. We've received the budget status executive summary for the period ending December 31st, the treasurer's report for that period as well, and the student activity report for the fourth quarter, October 31st, 21 through December 21. In there, under number 4 for number 11A, is also something Lou alluded to earlier, which is the budget amendment and transfer. Questions in regards to any of those items on the financial reports? No, I think I can pass them all at once as opposed to separately. Motion to approve all of the financial reports as delivered to the board.
So moved.
Moved by Julene,
Second.
seconded by Esther. All those in favor? Approved. Next up, our student representative, Lila Munger.
Hello, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. So first, I'll start off by giving a little briefing on all the sports going on right now. Sectional season is upon us, so that's really exciting for everyone. Boys swimming had sectionals last Wednesday, and they got 5th overall. Nordic skiing sectionals were this weekend and yesterday, and once again, Brighton did amazing. In the individual girls race, Kate Angelotti, she's a junior, won the event, and the Brighton girls team won their 4th straight sectional championship, so that's really impressive. Additionally, the Brighton boys for Nordic also did well. They finished 3rd, and Miles Matters finished 3rd place overall as an individual. Ice hockey starts their sectionals tonight with a game against Geneva. And alpine skiing has sectionals this morning and tomorrow. Today was the boys race for alpine, and Ben Como won his GS race. And I'm not sure if he won slalom, but I know he was like a top contender, so that's really exciting. And then obviously, most important, track and field has sectionals Friday night. So yeah, it's live streamed, just letting you all know. So then next, I'm excited to share with you a really nice learning opportunity that VHS had. So as you all know, this month was Black History Month. So to celebrate, the Black Student Union hosted an assembly for the school. The seniors were able to watch the assembly live in the gym, and then it was live streamed to the homerooms of the other grades. So that was really nice for all the seniors to go down and watch. So first, Dr. Sean Nelms, who's the superintendent at East High, zoomed in and shared some words of wisdom with the school. The Black Student Union then presented Dr. Nelms with the Truth in Action Recognition Award for his commitment to social justice and community building. Next, the Black Student Union shared about how they went to a conference earlier in the year and were in awe of the African drummers at the conference. So then they invited Wamba African drumming and dance from Ghana to the high school to share the experience with the entire student body. There was a dancer and 2 drummers who came, and they were, like, both groups were super talented. Overall, it was a really nice assembly, and I don't know, just a really exciting way it kind of boosted school spirit, and I thought it was really nice. Additionally, this past week and weekend, our amazingly talented actors and crew put on Beauty and the Beast. I did not get a chance to go, but everyone I talked to was amazed at how professional the entire performance was. The students in the production, as well as several staff members, all put in a tremendous amount of hard work that clearly paid off, and everyone had a great experience. That is all I have for today, so thank you all for having me here tonight.
Great, thank you very much, Lila. Board of Education reports. We'll start with the Monroe County School Board Association reports. Labor Relations, our luncheon meeting is actually tomorrow, and it's in regards to the new marijuana laws and their impact on the schools. So that will be an interesting discussion to be sure tomorrow. So that's Labor Relations. Information Exchange.
Did you get to go? I know it was about you. Information exchange, I think I was at Brighton Beliefs meeting, I think that's where I was, and I couldn't attend information exchange. But Hillary Chilson from the Rochester Museum and Science Center presented on planning and educational opportunities for the solar eclipse, which is a year and a half away. Is it 2023, I think?
You're stating that as a
I wasn't
question.
there,
I didn't-
so I
yes,
don't
that's
know.
right. The upcoming solar eclipse.
That's right, okay.
Yeah,
Yes, the
yeah.
upcoming solar eclipse.
All right, thank you. Legislative, we actually had a legislative breakfast that I believe both Christina and Karen and Dr. McGowan were at.
It was a great event. I can't always say that about past sessions of the legislative breakfast. But we had a strong attendance, both with our local and regional legislators, as well as school board members from across the county, some from Ontario County. Folks were pretty united. School board members were pretty united across the board in reminding our legislators that we need to have a clear path forward when it comes to moving slowly out of the pandemic. So I talked to Sarah Clark personally, I think Dr. McGowan did as well, about the need for school districts to have the state set some firm metrics about conditions set for things like unmasking and how we move forward out of the pandemic. Dr. McGowan, Christina, do you have anything to add?
I sat at the senators' table, and that was an interesting table. Just, a lot of the school board members were really thankful for the federal funds that our senators had brought to our districts, and so we talked a little bit about how different districts were using those funds. There was advocacy around the busing issue, and helping perhaps at the federal level to advocate for more staffing. And then the other table I sat at was the New York State Ed Department, and that was also quite interesting. There was a lot of discussion about curriculum.
I had the opportunity, as Karen mentioned, to speak with Assemblymember Clark quite a bit about an off-ramp with metrics and clear parameters from the state, and that the state should play a role in that and provide districts with support. We also had really interesting conversations both with Sarah Clark and with Senator Cooney's staff around what will happen after Foundation Aid is fully implemented. What is the plan then, right? So what kind of increases could we be thinking about to be strategic now in the long term? Where are we heading is kind of the bigger picture. And what is the impact of reform of the formula So the demographics that we've talked about driving the actual need that I mentioned in tonight's presentation, some are outdated, some are not considered appropriately, and that formula probably needs some redesign. We focused a lot on saying just fund the formula now, because there is a formula, but there is a really important conversation that needs to continue to take place around reform of the formula overall to better and more accurately reflect the needs of districts. So really great conversations, and thoughtful dialogue with the legislators. It was, I would agree with Karen and Christina, well done and an impactful event.
It's been a pleasure actually to work with our current group of legislators. They're incredibly responsive. I know that there are needles they can't always move for us, but I feel like I'm getting more than lip service.
I would agree.
Thank you very much. Briefly on BOCES, I did receive an update from Mark Kokanovich, obviously our former board president and our representative to the Monroe 1 BOCES. Just a quick update, they held a mini retreat on February 3rd, which was a review of the 2021-2022 organizational goals. They continue to do a significant amount of policy review, including the 9,000 series personnel policies and the 100 series covering non-discrimination, equal opportunity, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they are already beginning, speaking of budget season all the time, to work on the 2022-2023 Monroe 1 BOCES budget, including special education program budgets and regional information center budgets. So thankful to Mark for his continued work for our community in regards to BOCES. Other board member reports, and Christina, I might as well start with you and we'll just work down the table this way.
Okay, so I've actually had two. So I'm on the I'm a representative for our area for the New York State Board Association for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and we had a presentation last month from the BOCES of New York State representative about their framework in terms of how they see DEI work in our schools and how we can support our administration in doing that work. This last month, we actually gave some feedback on marketing materials that will go out to all of the New York State school districts in terms of the importance of the work that we're doing in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we also talked a little bit about what our role as board members were to support our administrators in terms of the curricular aspects that have been challenged recently.
Thank you. Esther?
The Hiring Practices Committee met on the 31st of January. It was a really inspiring meeting, continuing our collaboration with Natalie Zwerger and Recenter, examining our questioning as far as the interviewing process, incorporating the need for students being involved in the interviewing process, understanding that they are a huge asset and a natural evaluator of potential candidates for who we may hire in the future. The possibility of incorporating a 70-plus member base group of interviewing staff so that we are always available in case when people are coming in to interview for specific jobs, and also to keep to make sure that the questions that we are asking our potential candidates are equitable and continue to keep our line of communication open so we have a diverse group of people coming in.
Well, make note of the fact that typical of most of our committees, that's a committee that's comprised of board members, administration and staff, and community volunteers. So we get a good look from all the people who are affected by the hiring practices. Thank you very much. Karen? Good?
I was scheduled to attend the French Road Building Equity Committee meeting, but it happened on our not early dismissal, but February 3rd. We had sort of a snow day. It was the snow day eve, and they canceled all activities that night, so I couldn't attend. And then Julian and I represented the board at the school start time committee meeting that we had last week. And the committee was able to hear from representatives from the Webster Central School District and their experience with implementing a later start time to give us more ideas for feasibility here in our district.
Okay.
I'm all set.
Okay.
I reported on last time.
Julie?
I missed the special ed review meeting because that conflicted with the early start time meeting, and I still haven't figured out how to be in two places at one time. But the only other thing I wanted to share is that on Thursday is Say Yes to the Dress at Brighton High School, and all students are invited when they have some free time to come down, and we have clothing that might appeal to just about anybody. So it's not just dresses for women.
It could be Say Yes to the Suit.
It could be Say Yes to the Suit, but it doesn't have the same ring.
Okay. It doesn't. I'll make note of, quickly, just from a construction standpoint, as we continue to, and I give Lou and the buildings teams and the principals great credit on this, trying to wrap up the final pieces on a number of projects. There are a few items still to be completed at Council Rock, and we met with the contractors in regards to those items. And I'll look back at Marin there for just a second. We also have bleachers that finally need to be installed over at French Road that may be getting installed over February break, assuming everything arrives. We've been pretty well guaranteed, I think, Lou, that they are going to be installed. So as is typical of projects of this scale, there's what's typically called a punch list. Those last few items that you've just got to get at with the contractors to make sure things are, there might be a particular light in one room or something like that. And we say it every time, but we have an outstanding buildings team, and they've been out just incredible at documenting things, having communications and noting things, and making sure that we're only spending the dollars that we need to, and that the contractors are living up to their commitments. So grateful for those folks as well. Where are we? Nicole, you are next.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me here. Hopefully you were able to open the report and look at some of the awesome photographs and listen to some of the stories and watch the videos. I'll start with Council Rock. Miss Flanagan's kindergarten class did a unit on civics and responsibility. They were able to present via Zoom to the families, and then they also had a food drive for the Brighton food cover. They learned about responsibilities at home and within the community and at school. They used Mo Willems' books, and particularly Pigeon, who is not responsible, to make some of those connections. They made a responsibility to the rescue book, and if you went to the link, or if you go to the link, you can hear students reading the books. They also use the habits of mind, creating the habit of mind, creating, imagining, and innovating to think of their own pigeon books, like don't let the pigeon fix the iPads, don't let the pigeon be the principal. They shared these ideas, and then they had a pigeon day. And you can see some of the food that they collected, and of course the artwork they did of what the pigeon should not do. At the beginning of February, Julie Gray, who's a mother of a first grader, Micah, and of a third grader, Noah, visited Miss Davis's music class for a violin presentation. Mrs. Files' first grade class actually attended, and she's a violinist who performs with RPO, Buffalo Symphony, and teaches at Hobart. And they have been using Peter and the Wolf to learn about different instruments and kind of the tones and voices of those instruments. So she came in and showed them her violin, played for them, had different sizes of violins, including a student small violin, and students were able to actually play. So you can see some pictures, and then of course our dog is in the picture. Winnie's there, she was enjoying it too. For extended studies in second grade, they did a Habits of Mind cluster group. They were thinking flexibly and interdependently about ways to support the community, so they actually made artwork with their handprints, sold those note cards to families, friends, schools, staff. They raised just under $1,200 for Wild Wings at Bend and Ponds, and then one group picked a dog rescue and was able to donate $250 to Bell's Buds Rescue. We'll head over to French Road. there. Janice Mix, who was, I believe, originally going on the Israel partnership, she had her health class actually make a presentation introduction video about what they do in a normal health class school day, and the link was right there. At 12 Corners Memorial Art Gallery partnered with the 6th grade and gave them 35 artifacts that were from different world religions. Students were able to view the items and start to make connections and understand similarities, differences, and you'll see some awesome photographs there. The best part is the photographs. Showing the kids doing things. Marianne Walters' 6th and 7th grade classes for German. They were able to take regular items that they would have in their classroom and start to describe them. They chose it, wrote and illustrated their item. Maria Katsetos' social studies classes put together materials for Chinese New Year. I was actually a classroom that received some of these materials. They were wonderful, so the 6th graders created them and then also had themselves reading books, picture books on Chinese New Year. It was great. So some of the teachers listed, there are 1st and 2nd grade and then a 3rd grade teacher there too. So really, really nice connection. 6th grade life science students in Julie Whipple's class had a guest speaker, Michelle Cavallaro, who is the parent of a student. She shared information about her job where she studies people with hemophilia, and students in the class are currently learning about genetics, so it was a great connection for them to make and see a real life person doing it. And then continuing on at 12 Corners, you can see students who made it into all-county orchestra, junior high all-county band, and elementary all-county band. So congratulations to all those students listed. That's what I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As always, a lot going on, as we like to say.
There's a lot.
Dr. McGowan.
I have nothing more to add tonight.
All right, let's see. We have some approval of second read policies. These, as noted, are all pretty standard. I'll make a couple of quick comments and then push all four of them forward for approval. Policies 7320, 6213, and 7320 is for students, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and other substances. Next two, 6213 and 6150 for personnel. And finally, D, and I'll make note of this one as regards the masking policy. This was discussed last time as we prepare sort of, I think the expression you used was off-ramp, and as we sort of understand what could happen over the next few months. And in that area, masking I'm talking about, it seems as though it evolves or changes every day, so we'll be ready for that. Questions in regards to any of the second read policies that are before you?
I have one small question,
Okay.
you know, and it's more for you all who are more versed in this. In policy 6213, for language acquisition certificates and continuing education, they talk about employees holding an English to speakers of other languages certificate. Is that capitalized if that is like a certificate that someone holds? It's a wordy description anyway for a certificate someone holds. It's minor, but I figured I'd bring it up since that's why we read these. So, and it's an English to speakers of other languages certificate. Capped, not capped?
Great
Julian is the
question.
expert.
I don't know the answer to that.
So typically, we cut and paste those. Those are from the policy service, the way they've written them. And so if they capitalize them or didn't capitalize them, it was based on what they do.
That's what I figured.
But that said, we'll check and find out.
Okay,
Not
it's on
sure
page 2 of 6213.
You'd think if it's a proper noun that they would
It just
capitalize
helps
that,
to
it would make
say
sense,
that
but-
that's the name of the certificate that they hold.
Correct.
Okay.
No, totally agree with you, yep.
So would we put that forward to approve and then we would change it to a capital? Okay.
Yeah, because
So
it's not a
with
substitute.
that possible change, motion to approve item 12, A, B, C, and D, those four policies.
So moved.
Moved by Karen,
Second?
seconded by Susan. All those in favor? Aye. Number 13, approval of the property tax levy limit submission. This is something that Lou went over earlier in the evening. It is a state formula, as we like to say. It contains a lot of real numbers and a couple of estimates based on what we have from the state so far. Are there any additional questions for either Lou or Dr. McGowan in regards to the property tax levy limit submission? Motion to approve that tax levy limit submission is in front of us.
So moved.
Moved by Andrea,
Second.
seconded by Esther. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 14, consent agenda, which includes approval of personnel changes, recommendations from the Committee on Special Ed and on preschool special ed, fundraising activities, there are 3 listed here, and 2 field trip approvals. As we like to say, there's a lot going on. Any questions in regards to any of these things? Motion to approve.
So moved?
Moved by Susan,
Second?
seconded by Christina. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anything else you would like to add at this point?
No, we'll see people in about 20 minutes.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Andrea,
Second.
seconded by Karen. All those in favor?
Aye.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.